Yeah.
Right,
perfect.
there we are.
Perfect. Go ahead.
So I'm just going to start it now. So basically, this presentation is about mainly sort of my history with Bulgaria, and it links back about 8 years now. It also covers a little bit a business that I run called Outdoorholics, where we specialize in hiking trips. And it gives a little bit of background to it. And hopefully you guys find it quite interesting. So adventures in Bulgaria and hiking. Where did it all start? Well, my background is I did a degree in electrical and electronic engineering, which ended up being a master's degree, 4 years. I used to love taking things apart when I was a kid and building stuff. And so that's what led me into the degree. During the degree and after it, I got involved in all sorts of little businesses. I ended up buying computers at auction at university from companies where they sort of got too slow. I used to upgrade the chips, upgrade the memory, and then go and sell them to fellow students who just needed something basic to do word processing on. That was my first real business. And I had all sorts of other businesses. Repairing Scion Revos. I think at one point I was the biggest business in the UK replacing the batteries for them. Selling CDs in bulk on eBay back in the days when you could make a profit doing these sort of things. And then in my 20s, I got into IT consultancy. And after about 6 years in that, it had done pretty well. And it was working for financial companies, and the money was pretty mind-blowing. I saved it all rather than go and spend it on women and expensive cars like a lot of my friends did. So then at the age of 30, I got into property development, which was a real passion of mine, carrying on from building things. And also started this company about a year and a half later called Outdoorholics. And basically, since I was 4 years old, I've loved hiking, which to me, hiking means going and exploring the countryside. And just going out, exploring, seeing things and being out in nature and away from everything. Right, so that is Outdoorholics. And this is a photo of ours from a trip to the Gower Peninsula in South Wales. And for anyone who doesn't know the Gower Peninsula, this is Rosili Beach, which was voted by National Geographic as the 3rd best beach in Europe. And Wales also has what is voted by National Geographic the 3rd best coastline in the world in Pembrokeshire. And National Geographic is American, so of course, the top beach in Europe can't be in America, but the top coastline in the world is of course in America, according to them. But for them to vote Pembrokeshire in South Wales, quite close to here, the 3rd best coastline in the world, is quite something. And I would say if it had the weather, it could possibly be one of the best in the world. It's a really gorgeous location. Here you've got a beach with a 1 kilometre high to low tide tidal range. Behind it here, if you can see in the middle, there's a tidal island called Worm's Head. You can actually walk to it for about 4 hours each low tide, so 2 hours sort of either side of the low tide. You walk across the seabed to get to it. It's an absolutely breathtaking place. Behind me on the left is a great big hill. So Outdoorholics, it was a hobby business I started about 11 years ago. Purely for the fun of it, I started it for free. And after about 6 months, I had a woman working for me, Vicky, who was my PA at the time. And the work I had was so much in answering emails, I got her to get involved. And at that point, because it was costing me money, I decided I had to start charging for it. Going to 2015, we were taking away 5,500 people a year. The admin was overwhelming for Vicky and myself. I lost track of why I started it, which was to get out hiking. And I would come home from my job in property development, and I'd spend usually 2 to 3 hours a night dealing with emails, and every day of every weekend working. It was just silly. So I had to get it to a point where it could run beyond me and grow. So basically, I looked at a map of Europe, and I looked at where the lowest salaries were. The first place that caught my eye was Ukraine, because the salaries are phenomenally cheap. Back in 2015, they're probably phenomenally cheap at the moment, if you can find anyone who can sort of take on a job out there. But within the EU, which was important to me because you get the regulation of the EU, and you also get a lot of conformity to employment laws, reduction of corruption and various other things, I chose Bulgaria. So I booked a holiday for, sorry, this is my reasons on next slide. So within the European Union, the lowest salaries, incredible countryside and mountains, and cheap property. And at the time I was looking to get a second home myself. And I was trying to buy a place up in Wales and the Brecon Beacon Mountains, and I just couldn't get it for the price I wanted. So coming to Bulgaria meant I could get a second home in Bulgaria, and then all my visits legitimately would be covered as a business expense. And that would be totally above board because I'm going out to the office on business. I can just stay on and also visit my second home. It also allowed me to get involved with property investment. I bought a house and a few flats, as well as our office in Plovdiv. And the prices in 2015 were pretty crazily cheap. So where to set up in Bulgaria? The three real places that came to me, I've put Veliko Turn because I couldn't remember the spelling of it, but Veliko Turnovo. I wasn't interested in the coast at all, so Varna or Burgas. I wanted somewhere that had access to the mountains. So I got a hire car for a week, and I went around and visited all three of them, and Plovdiv came out the clear winner. Very close to the capital, direct flights from Stansted in the UK, lower salaries in the capital. Also, there's less competition for staff in the capital. When I started Outdoorholics, recruitment was very easy because there were very few companies offering jobs except call centres. And sitting on the phone for 8 hours a day, sometimes working during the night, isn't a lot of fun. Plovdiv is also the oldest continually inhabited city in Europe, 20 minutes away from the mountains. And in 4 years' time, I think it had already been decided it would be the European culture capital. So now the work begins, finding an accountant and lawyer, recruiting, making a job, adverts, the first office, the second office, and then the third and final office. So coming out there was very interesting. For every single accountant I spoke to, they all gave me the same message. And the last one was very clear. He said to me, in his exact words, he said to me, a lot of people come from the UK with this idea of setting up an offshore centre. He said, every single one I've met, they've lost a load of money. It's always failed. He said, just do yourself a favour and go home. There's a lot of corruption. This will fail. I've never seen anyone make it work. I eventually found an accountant who agreed to take me on. The others wouldn't actually take me on. And there was a guy called Kirill, and he was very honest with me. He said to me, I'm not a real accountant, Graham. I've worked in accounting for 2 years. I pretty much know what to do. Whatever I don't know how to do, I'll figure it out. He said, if you come with me, I promise I'll make it work. I just like the guy and I liked his honesty, so I went with him. And he's proved very successful. He's now become a very good accountant. He's got a team. Last time I spoke to him, there's 3 people full-time working for him, and he's built a very good-sized business with an awful lot of clients. And his service has been great. He's been absolutely fantastic. I couldn't fault him. Some of the problems in Bulgaria, I'm going to touch off quickly. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and it really is like nothing I've ever seen in about 15 years of business. The biggest problem we had, first of all, was actually just making a job ad. Because if you go to jobs.bg, you cannot make a job ad unless you have a proper company set up. And to set up a company when we had the ownership of the company from the UK, even within the EU, was incredibly complicated. And that took about 3 months at a time to do. So I managed to find a woman who had a friend who owned a shoe factory, and we started making our initial adverts using their account for a shoe factory. And luckily, people did apply. They did sort of read the adverts. Our first office was basically going to Costa, and I'd buy coffees throughout the day. And that was where I did my work when I came to Plovdiv. I had nowhere else to go. I'd do interviews in Costa Coffee. People who came for the interviews assumed that we had an office or we didn't have a meeting room. People always found it quite amusing when I told them that was our office. And the first person I employed, their job was basically turn up to Costa every morning at 9 o'clock, work in Costa Coffee, and go home from Costa at the end of the day. At the second office, we went to a co-working space, which was a massive improvement, and it gave us all sorts of benefits. but we still had issues with it because we needed to pack away the kit at the end of the day. We had to work from laptops. We couldn't buy big screens. We couldn't get our own printer. We couldn't get our own setup and environment. So as we had the second office, I started to look at buying an office. And I will come on to that office later. I've got a series of photos of the office. So these are my sort of thoughts for the remainder of it. Rotary, at the time I came to Bulgaria, I was in the Rotary Club in the UK, the Rotary Club of Woking. And I got in touch with a Rotary Club in Plovdiv, and that's how I met. There's Petar there. I think I met you there, Dimitar, that night. And also, I forget the name of him, our guy, the lawyer. He was there. So we all met. The club did everything in Bulgarian, which I didn't find terribly sort of useful. But afterwards, we went for a drinking vino culture. And at the time I was dating a Bulgarian girl, I phoned her up for a bit of fun and got these guys talking in Bulgarian. And my partner at the time, who still works with Outdoorholics, she had a bad experience in Plovdiv, and her view of it from 20 years ago was that it was very mafia-ridden and dangerous. She was really worried that I'd been kidnapped, and I had to reassure her that I haven't kidnapped her, we've just gone for a drink. We had various issues buying the office because properties fell through. One had a lot of debt logged on it. One property we tried to buy, it turned out it was half built on the neighbour's land, and you weren't actually buying what you expected. I'm going to skip over some of this because I'm 12 minutes in, and this is only going to be about 20 minutes, and we've got questions. But it was a big learning for me. I think it was the first time I'd recruited people full-time, and my view of recruiting people was just, you chat with them. If they seem intelligent, you give them a job. And I got a very big awakening, as I'm sure you have, Angel and Carol, because I know you employ quite a few people, and Petar too. There's a lot more to recruiting people than just finding people who are intelligent and giving them a job. I'm going to skip over most of the rest of that. Right, this was a trip to the Rotary Club of Sofia International, which had a massive benefit that everything was done in English. So this was, I think, at the end of 2015. And it was a very interesting experience going to it. That night we had the German ambassador to Bulgaria who came along. There was a few very big business people from Plovdiv. I think one of them owned the largest chain of a certain type of restaurant in Bulgaria. And then at the time, there was a lot of people from Germany who were here with businesses. They had factories near Plovdiv, and they were basically here running the business. And most of them were living in Bulgaria. Some of them are having the most fantastic expat lifestyle, and sort of stories from that, including this guy who was a German guy. He seemed to spend his weekends swanning around 5-star hotels and driving his Porsche around the country. And he was quite memorable. At the time, he was the president of a club, and this was us exchanging banners. I then got contacted, I think it was by Dimitar, who said that he decided with a few other people to set up an international club in Plovdiv. And this would be a club that was English speaking, and they wanted to sort of build it and see if I was interested. And I thought it was a great idea. And I decided to commit to joining it and then to leaving my club in the UK, because you can only be a member of one club, and just sort of founding this club out in Bulgaria. And we got chartered on the 5th of January 2018, and that's the club you're all members of today. So this was quite an early meeting. We used to meet in the Tremontrium. At the time, the membership fee was about 750 lev a year, which was massive. It did include some very basic snack food and water, as you can see. And that was essentially a way that the hotel could get some money out of us and we could get used to the space. But as we found going here, the pressure on the finances of paying this hotel quite a lot of money each week for the food just made it unviable. So we ended up leaving the hotel and then sort of doing things in the way that we do at the moment. Right, next part of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about exploring Bulgaria, because this whole presentation is called Adventures in Bulgaria. I've put down Buzlija, which for me, I would say was by far, there's obvious spelling mistake in battle, It was by far the most memorable place that I went to, and also the most captivating place. It really resonated with me, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as we share the photos. So 1868, location of a final battle between the Bulgarians and the Ottoman Empire, which was probably like the struggle at the moment between Ukraine and Russia. The Ottoman Empire was massive. It was much more powerful, bigger and wealthier than Bulgaria, but Bulgaria became free. Bulgaria was built in 1974, about 1,500 meters high, and opened in 1981. And it fell into decay about 10 years later. It was built as a sort of celebration, I think in large part of communism. By the time communism fell, it just went out of use. And a lot of people weren't interested in it. And it was seen as a symbol of something the country wanted to forget. So this is Bulgaria. If you haven't been, I strongly suggest it. I went about 6 years ago. It was fully locked up, but there was always people breaking into it somehow. At the time I went, somebody had actually smashed through the side concrete. There was a tiny hole you could put yourself to and then go inside. Outside is quite something, the scale of it. You can see here a door that's a lot larger than the person, and the size of it is just breathtaking. But inside was something else. I believe at the moment they've got a security guard. But if you haven't gone to it, I strongly recommend it. And if you can try and get in, I highly recommend that too. This is a photo from inside. So originally, all of these were glass windows, and you can see a large part of Bulgaria. This is looking to the mountains, I think to the south, down to the Rotary mountains. And how this must have looked before the windows were smashed would have been breathtaking. Also inside this building, there was a vast amount of marble. All of the marble was stripped. It was stolen by people who then sold it. So all of the marble's gone. But this shows the inside of the main room, which they use for conferences. So going around the edge of it, you have these incredible mosaics, which were complete at the time the building was in use. Some of them have now been stolen and sort of taken down by people, and God knows what's happened to them. I think these are three of the famous people who were involved, either with the freedom of Bulgaria or at the end of the 1800s, or perhaps with communism. But that's been defaced. And the whole thing, all the marble's gone, and all the, you can see here little bits of the marble are left. It's all been stripped bare. The mosaics were quite amazing because there's no paint on them. All of these rocks, that's the natural colour of the stone that they found. It was an incredible job. And I can remember sitting in the middle of this where you have, the way it's been designed, you get an enormous echo. So if you talk in the middle, you can hear it throughout the whole room. And going downstairs, there was a lot more marble, and it was really lavish. And you can see a bit of the marble remaining where people couldn't remove it. But to me, I went here with my partner. I think I sat here for about half an hour. And what this meant to me was, although communism hasn't been proven to be the best system of working, you could really see the belief that people had in it. And this was basically a celebration of communism. And you could see the beauty that they've created. And I think it was very sad it fell into decay. But here you've got the old town in Plovdiv, which of course all of you folks know quite well. You've got here the old stadium. Down in Kapana, which hasn't changed that much in 7 years, but there's some more bars, a few less shops, it's got a bit more nightlife. This was a photo of Plovdiv in its setting. You can see here one of the 7 hills of Plovdiv. This was very interesting. It was a place I went out to called Cosmo Village, and 7 years ago it was derelict. I think this house was in use, that one was. Almost everything else was derelict. And at the time, I was buying property, and this to me just looked like an absolute gem, where I could really see this place taking off in the future once people put money into it and developed it. I did try and buy something here, but there was just nobody who wanted to sell. Kosovo, if you've been there now, has been massively developed. All of these are in use, and it is a hugely popular resort set up in the mountains. But it was interesting 6 years ago when I visited it. It was clearly going to become something like that. It just had everything going for it. Near the airport, remote, beautiful location, and quite isolated. This was Costa Coffee. And I think this was a work colleague of mine, Ellie, who I started working with. This was the desk that we used to take and where we did interviews. This is the Outdoorholics office when we bought it. It's on Rusky Boulevard at the top. If you go past it today, you'll see a big Outdoorholics banner on the outside. And when we bought it, the whole thing was covered in this very bright pink. We never know why, but we used to suspect maybe it was something to do with porn, but we just had no idea. And the office came with a few bits of old furniture as well. This was the office after we decorated it and kitted it out. This was to seat 14 people. It will take a maximum of 18. And at the end, we made a lovely library. In the early days, I used to work such long hours that I bought a sofa bed, and I used to sleep in the office regularly. And then we built a little kitchen next to it. And it's got a big 80 square meter balcony that goes around it. This was the team that we had on the day up to the mountains on a sort of work day about 4 years ago. This is the office cat who came around. We used to feed it, and then the cat ended up having kittens. And I think this was me giving it some of my cottage cheese after breakfast. Photo of Kapana in the snow about 4 years ago. This is one of our hiking trips that we do with the company, and this one's actually out in Bulgaria in the Rila Seven Lakes. And we do so many of them. We bought our own sets of snowshoes, and they proved a massive amount of fun. This is our guide, Callow. And this was a trip, I think, back in 2019. This was the same trip, getting sort of higher up in the mountains. And this was us having lunch. And it was so warm, despite the snow, you could actually sort of hang around in your t-shirt. And that brings me to the end of the presentation, so 22 minutes in, and time for questions, folks.
I'm glad to see that one of my current employees has been working with you as well, and one of my current business partners has been working with you. Zlatka and George. So Zlatka is working with us, and George is, we do business together. So I'm glad to see that. And I also recognize some of the challenges that you faced. When I set up the business, my second business here in Bulgaria, the first thing I also did was taking a proper lawyer and an accountant to help me through the messy things when otherwise you're not helped to set a business. So I saw in your list also that you follow the reasoning. Why do you base your self-employment? I did exactly the same. I checked very carefully also these different aspects: cost of salaries, positioning of the in Plovdiv with regards to connections, airports, and etc. So I'm actually glad to see that. Obviously, we have similar concerns when we set up a business or when we start a business in Bulgaria.
On that topic, quickly, I just want to say before I forget, I know, David, you chatted about setting up a business. And I think it's a very interesting idea you have, and I think you can make a good success of that. I would say when people set up a business, people tend to make exactly the same mistakes. And there's a brilliant book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, which details, I only read it after I made all the mistakes, but all the stages you go through. You start a business because you love what you do. You think you'll be doing that all the time. And then you realize actually you spend most of your time running the business and operating it, and you have to build a team and get out of it. And it's a fantastic book, which I'd recommend reading in advance of starting a business, David. And
yeah, how did you spell the name of the book again, Graham?
E-MYTH.
Right, okay.
It's a small book, but it's an absolute gem. And I read it multiple times. It's brilliant.
It's definitely worth a read on for what I want to do, that's for sure.
And if you want any advice when you do come to do it, David, come to myself, Carol.
Okay, I will do, yeah.
Pato employs a lot of people, Angle does, we're all here to help you.
Thank you, that's very good of you.
Sorry, Carol.
Okay. Okay, any other questions for Graham that you would like to ask? No?
Oh,
So-
one question.
Yes,
Wh-
Coco?
wh- Why don't you live in Bulgaria anymore?
That's a very good question, Coco. I was actually just thinking about talking about that because I think it's very relevant. I think for me, one of the attractions, as well as the villa I got up in Hebrino, when I came to Plovdiv, I bought a flat right in the centre, about 5 minutes from Kapana for myself. And at the time, I'd always dreamed of living in the heart of London, and I couldn't afford to 7 years ago. Property isn't cheap in the heart of London. About 2 years ago, the sort of coronavirus hit. I decided to sort of sell up my main home in Surrey, and I have now bought a flat right in the heart of London, behind Carnaby Street, if you know it, David, and Regent Street. And I think I realised I've had a lot of fun coming to Plovdiv for sort of 6 years, going out Kapana, but I also realised that I've seen it and done it. And I think the stage I'm at in life, London has a lot more to offer me. I spend a lot of time now at the British Museum. I go to the National Gallery probably every couple of weeks. I love the galleries. And also the people I can connect with in London. There's a much sort of wider range of people than there are in Plovdiv. So I think at the moment, my future looks like being still mainly based in the UK. And I don't expect to be coming back to Plovdiv probably more than about 3 or 4 times a year. But we'll still have to see how things go. Does that answer your question, Coco?
Yes. Yes. Oh, you recognize this breed?
Is it the same as we had at the office?
No, this is a British breed actually. It's a British blue, short hair.
Yeah.
It originates from England. The
Right,
cat,
nice.
cat breed.
Nice.
Okay. Any other questions for Graham? No. Okay, Graham. Then I would like to thank you because you're the first one that did the presentation. We have a couple of other presentations coming up in the weeks to come, and I kindly invite those that have not identified yet what they would like to present or what they would like to talk about. Please let me know. I have Theodora, Christo, and Jana still lined up to provide us with a topic. Okay. So once again, thank you very much, Graham. I'd like to thank all the other members as well for your participation. If there are any other questions or any other comments you would like to raise, please do now. Otherwise, I call the end of the meeting. And then we see each other back most likely, potentially in 2 weeks. And I say potentially because I will be in Turkey in 2 weeks. Actually, I'm traveling for 3 weeks. And I do not know what I will be in terms of internet connection. So I will inform you when and how we will meet. Okay. To Angel, I wish you a very quick recovery so that you're 100% healthy again soon. And for all the other members as well, keep it safe and healthy. Okay. That's it.
Thank you.
From my side,
Okay.
bye-bye to everyone. And I will send you some screenshots and a link to the video that you can then share also with those you think are interested in this, let's say, business perspective as presented by Graham. Okay. Ciao, ciao to everyone. Have a nice evening.
Ciao, ciao.
Safe and healthy.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, Graham. Bye-bye.